Hi, I'm Mal from the Money Study, bringing you another episode of our Take 10 Challenge. Up to number 33. Should we or shouldn't we put more money into our super, or should we invest that money elsewhere? And we sort of covered this bits and pieces throughout these few sessions, but let's just sort of summarise this a bit to sort of get a bit of a good picture as to what we should do with our money. Before we do, there's the disclaimer: facts and figures, information only, it's not advice. Now, we certainly have got the choice in either putting money into a super fund or putting the money somewhere that's got nothing to do with super whatsoever. And there are a lot of factors and pros and cons in this situation here. But I get a lot of arguments saying, well, I can invest in this and I can invest in that outside of super. I can't do that inside my super fund. That's not correct in most cases, because a lot of these super funds do indeed have what they call direct investment options, DIO there, allowing them to indeed invest in right down to the share level, or an exchange traded fund level. And these are the things we're going to be talking about later on. So we can certainly have a good selection inside some of these other super funds. But of course, if you really want to get carried away and choose your investment, and have some oddball type things, then generally you can create a self-managed super fund, an SMSF, and choose your investments. Depending on what the trust deed of your self-managed super fund says, it may limit you to what you can purchase, but basically have a talk with your accountant. If you've got a specific thing that you want to put inside super, it may be your own business premises, may be an investment property, may be a wine collection or an art collection, or, we can really get quite carried away these days with things like self-managed super funds. So I don't really believe that the choice of investments is really a big deal when we come to decide whether it's super or not. I think there's a lot more overriding factors that would decide your choice there. One of the first ones obviously is your age. Of course, a 20-year-old who's still 40 odd years away from being able to access their super means that, superannuation is certainly not as inspiring to put money and lock it up for 40 years, unless that's what your intention is, of course, to, this is for my retirement, and then compared to someone who is, 55. So how many years to retirement? And because it's not just 55, it is really, some people are going to retire at 60, some people are going to retire at 65, and some people are going to say, well, I may never retire. And so this whole business of the accessibility is one of the issues. If you're going to put money into super, it's locked up until you've retired over your preservation age, generally speaking, or reach 65. So if that is not an issue for you, where you're either already over 60 or over 65, then there's no preservation. Obviously, it's not really a problem. But a younger person, yes, I can certainly understand why you want to be looking at other investments. See, someone who's 20 wanting to retire at 50, they have to have their investments, a big chunk of their investments outside of super, so they can access that lump of money at 50, live on that lump of money, and perhaps it drains until there's nothing left by the time they just hit their preservation age, and boom, they can access their super. So the age and the years to retirement is certainly a major factor. So you really need to have plans sort of set aside. What am I trying to achieve here? When do I really want to retire? What sort of goals do I need? What am I going to need? So remembering that if you are going to retire and contemplating setting up an income stream, which we'll certainly be doing sessions on that in the future, but an income stream is basically giving your super back, and it's all tax-free. It's all tax-free. Doesn't matter what it earns, it's all tax-free. So that's a nice place to have our money in retirement, but you can only start an income stream from the money that's in super, and of course you've got to be eligible to put it in super to do it. So if you leave it too late and then you're over the caps, or you're over a situation where you're not working any longer and you can't get money in, and so it goes on, you've got to do a bit of forward planning here. So you could indeed have investments outside of super, but all along the way thinking that, okay, just in case I need that money, I can pull it out. But if you don't need the money by the time you get to retirement, then we can throw it in, so long as it's under, obviously, these non-concessional caps and so forth, that we've got enough space there to be able to put the money in. And obviously, if we've got a short-term goal where we've got plans to buy a new car, a big super-duper holiday, or daughter's wedding, or whatever it might be, where we're going to need a lump of money, then we've got to make sure that our investments are outside of super, if we don't have access to our super there. Now, of course, a combination, could be the answer. It might be a case that we've got to do 40% of our money's got to be outside for, goals number 1, 2, and 3, and 60% in our super because of our, longer term goals as such. So you're not sort of locked into concrete with what you do there, but obviously once it's inside super, yes, that is locked up, and it's very hard to then change your mind. So a bit of forward planning is always required before you start sticking too much money into super. Now, of course, we've already spoken about the tax advantages. So if you're doing salary sacrifice, put it into super, you get a tax deduction for putting it in. You're not going to get a tax deduction for putting money into an investment outside of super. There are some tax advantages in having money outside of super, which we'll go through in a sec. But obviously, as we know, superannuation, the earnings are taxed at 15%, and you get a tax deduction for putting it in. So therefore, it comes down to comparing that to your overall situation, as in what tax bracket are you in? And if you're going to buy investments, what type of investment are you buying? Does the investment that you are buying that's not super provide any tax benefits? And of course, we'll be talking about shares in future sessions, and shares, when they pay you your profit, your dividends are paid to you, then there's some tax benefits in the fact that the company has already paid its tax. You get what's called a franking credit to reduce the tax you've got to pay. And in some cases, you can get income from shares and pay no tax on it, or even get an extra bit of money because of the fact that your income tax rate is less than the company, and so it goes on. So we'll go through that when we're talking about shares. So don't assume that you're always worse off by having investments outside. It just depends on what type of investment you've got. And of course, there's all sorts of other interesting things that have tax advantages, which we'll go through one by one. And of course, if you've got a partner, then it also becomes interesting from a tax perspective in the regard that what tax bracket are they in? Could they hold an investment? Just imagine you've got a partner who's, is not even working, or only working, 1 day a week or something, on a very low income. If they had an investment outside of super in their name, the earnings from that super fund are going to they may not even have to pay any tax on it at all because of their other incomes below the tax-free threshold. So if there's an ability to have an investment in, there's no tax deductions, but all we're worried about is the earnings and what we're going to pay on when it earns a big lot of money, then perhaps it should be in the name of the partner who's not earning much money. And of course, if there's the whole business of age difference, if one's older than the other, accessibility might be good for one but not so good for the other, and so it goes on. So there's a whole lot of different thinking that's got to be around and looking at your scenario and all of your investments when you've got that sort of scenario where one partner is a lot different in age. Because if your younger partner is still working, their income could kill you if you're eligible for age pension. And it's because age pension is taken on combined income as a couple. Fees, now look, normally, if you've got a similar sort of fund, so to speak, the fees would possibly be cheaper inside super, literally because it's you're sort of pooling your money with all of these other people, and it's like a wholesale investment. Whereas if you tried to get an investment outside of super, you're just a one man, and so your fees are probably higher. But there could be situations where, obviously, if you're buying things like shares, well, there are no fees. There are costs in buying and costs in selling. but there's no sort of annual fee, then there could be some other advantages in that. So fees are always just something we just need to, before we jump, what fees are indeed we paying, do some comparison. As we sort of indicated, actually I don't think we have yet, but when we start talking about insurances and so forth, then it literally means that inside super, we don't have to find the premium for the insurance. It's being paid out of the super fund. But obviously if you've got insurance outside of super, then of course, we've got to pay a premium. And so if by putting money into a super fund, could we indeed put the money into a super fund to pay for insurance premiums? So the insurance is something that we need to go through in quite a bit of in detail as time goes on there. And of course, if you're already capped out, you're already hit $1.9 million in super and you can't get more large money into super, well, it's a bit of a no-brainer, obviously, that we start looking elsewhere. Maybe we look at your partner first to get them up to 1.9. That'd be wonderful to have both partners hitting 1.9 in super. But if we are hitting all these caps and restrictions of what we can and can't do, then yep, using investments outside, nothing's stopping us from having $5 million in shares or in investment property or whatever the case may be. And of course, the last thing there, consider your estate planning in the regard that yes, money from super going to an adult child, therefore there is indeed tax payable to an adult child. To a partner, it's tax-free from super, but money from all the concessional money from super going to an adult child, there's tax. And of course, outside, we don't have that tax, but we would have capital gains tax issues. Capital gains is when you sell something and what did you make, and there's a tax to be paid. And of course, if someone inherits something, there's still a capital gains issue that needs to be considered. In that case, have a talk to your accountant if you're really worried about how the money is distributed in retirement or in death and so forth, then have a good chat to your accountant. We're happy to sort of give you guidance, but we're not allowed to give you tax advice, but we can certainly explain all the issues, how it works and the things you need to consider there. Look forward to joining you again on another session.